If we want to outlast the stars, we must scatter like seeds on the cosmic wind, and so our survival lies not in one lone ark, but entire fleets to settle the billions and billions of worlds awaiting us. For all our technology, for all our history, humanity remains tied to a single world. Earth is our cradle, our garden, our fortress, our pale blue dot, but it is also our cage. So long as we remain bound to one planet, we are only a single catastrophe away from extinction, and if the goal is not just to survive, but to thrive across cosmic timescales, then no single colony, no single ark will ever be enough. True survival means dispersal. It means not a lone ship carrying all our hopes, but fleets, swarms, branching out across the stars. Why Ark Swarms? The survival imperative. Every civilization, every species eventually faces its doomsday clock. Some threats are our own making: nuclear wars, engineered pandemics, runaway artificial intelligence, ecological collapse. Others are written in the universe itself: asteroid strikes, supervolcanoes, nearby supernovae, gamma ray bursts, or simply the slow wearing away of habitability as the Earth changes on the march of geological and cosmic time. It doesn't take imagination to see how fragile our position is. A rock only a few kilometers wide could undo centuries of progress in a single strike. A starquake or rogue planet could warp through our neighborhood with no warning. And if we dodge every bullet, Earth itself will one day cease to be habitable, cooked by a swelling sun. Colonization is our insurance policy against these threats. It is also our pathway to a grander destiny at a galactic scale. But just as one colony is not enough to protect against the end of Earth, one ship is not enough to guarantee the survival of humanity. A lone ark is brittle. It might fail in transit, succumb to accident or disease, be taken over by tyranny, wrecked by sabotage, or find its destinations unsuitable. History is filled with expeditions that set out with high hopes and ended in tragedy because they were isolated, alone, and unable to recover when disaster struck. Biology offers the model. No species survives by planting a single seed. Trees scatter thousands, fish lay millions of eggs, spores and pollen ride every breeze. It is not because each one is guaranteed to succeed, but because enough will. Humanity uses a different strategy, a bigger focus on each seed succeeding, and yet we may benefit from a synthesis of the two here. If we had to flee into the ocean of the night, ahead of some predator from afar or of our own creation, we might need to scatter to the wind. Even if time is on our side, once we've learned the lessons of Mars and Alpha Centauri, we have endless billions of stars to reach, meaning home to countless minor planets too. So interstellar colonization must not be about one shining vessel, but about swarms, armadas, many chances, many routes, many homes. An Ark Swarm is not just about preventing extinction, though that is the urgent move. It is also about ensuring diversity. Each branch of humanity that departs carries with it not just genetic material, but culture, language, and identity. Just as seeds scatter to grow forests of different shapes and sizes, our swarms of colony ships will grow civilizations as varied as the stars they settle. Survival and flourishing are two sides of the same coin, and both demand dispersal. Why fleets beat lone ships. If dispersal is the principle, fleets are the practice. Sending one massive ark may capture the imagination, but history and physics suggest is not the wisest approach. Fleets, not loners, are how you build resilience. Redundancy is the first reason. One ship can fail. A dozen ships mean failures can be absorbed. Engines misfire, habitats crack, crops fail, accidents happen, so can sabotage. In a fleet, the loss of one vessel need not be the loss of the mission. Survivors can transfer, resupply, or at least be mourned without ending the dream. In an age when resources for interstellar colonization may be abundant, redundancy is not waste, it is wisdom. Even though the ships might move at near light speeds, they might only be separated by tens of kilometers and able to travel between themselves with minimal fuel. Indeed, they may even connect by thin tethers by which high-speed data, power, and even cable cars of people and freight might travel with no propellant expended. There is a big advantage to larger ships, who'd have thicker armor for a lower fraction of their mass, but at a certain point, especially for ships whose internal configuration is more two-dimensional, like the inner side of a cylinder or a ring, more size doesn't help as much, while redundancy of ships in number does. We are never today really pondering small ships here. Even the tiniest might be bigger than an aircraft carrier, but it might be the multi-megaton ship with a Stanford Taurus for its living space is more optimal size than an O'Neill cylinder or even larger ships. We discussed this recently in our episode on humanity's first interstellar colony mission, presumably to Alpha Centauri. Generally speaking, in a space habitat, you get about 1 ton of mass for every square meter of living area. Ships may add more levels and use reserve resources or equipment as shielding instead of dirt and water, but overall, a cylinder ship and a ring habitat ship probably give about the same living area per unit of mass, more or less. The main difference with interstellar ships is that most of their shielding needs to be concentrated on the front. That's why long, narrow designs are favored over wide ones. A ring ship isn't really optimal here, though if you keep your deceleration fuel or gear, like a folded up light sail, stored in the bow, it can serve as sufficient shielding. My guess is you'd opt for a cylindrical habitat, no wider than needed for comfortable spin gravity, with length making up the rest. Fleets can also take advantage of this geometry. An armada could travel in a linear formation, with no need to scatter laterally. In such a setup, the lead ships might deploy a millimeter-thick but very broad shield, bristling with sensors, designed to absorb or fragment incoming debris, so the ships behind them only hit by dispersed fragments rather than concentrated strikes. Such a sail shield would be very light, and once you're up to cruising speed, you could use a simple pushing laser to keep it in front of you. Redundancy comes naturally in any of these fleet arrangements too. Groups can break apart and reform as needed. When pausing to settle a system, some ships can remain behind while others refuel or build additional craft. In fact, interstellar fleets can manufacture new ships even while underway, so long as they periodically stop to refuel and gather raw materials. They do, after all, have a lot of time on their hands. Speaking of breaking up the fleet, system diversity is the second reason to have one. A solar system is not one world. Even our own holds Earth, the Moon, Mars, the asteroid belt, the icy moons of Jupiter, Titan, and more. Indeed, at least 1 million minor planets who can each support an entire nation and all offering different opportunities. Any target system humanity settles will likely have multiple habitable or terraformable candidates, plus countless resource-rich smaller bodies. To send one ship aiming at one planet is to waste the rest of the system. A fleet can divide, with some ships settling worlds, others building stations, and still others moving on. Knowledge retention is the third reason. A single Ark, no matter how large, risks losing critical expertise if accidents strike. Fleets can specialize, carrying complementary skill sets, industries, or cultural heritages, and trade between them. Where one ship might lose a surgeon or an engineer to bad luck, a fleet can keep those professions alive across its vessels. Even a bigger ship risks losing most of its doctors if they all happen to be in the same hospital that gets blown up. The diffusion of knowledge is humanity's greatest strength, and fleets ensure it survives the long voyage. Don't assume digital redundancy either. The captain of a ship has very good motivations, if not necessarily ethical ones, to acquire control of the ship archives and be able to threaten to erase every remaining copy if someone tries to mutiny. That's a much more viable control strategy on one lone ship than a fleet or a planet. Captains and senior crew might be nigh immortal posthumans too. An Ark ship is probably breeding up population along the way, but don't assume that means the original folks are dying off. I would honestly be rather surprised if death by old age was still a thing by the time the first interstellar ship launched, let alone routine dispatches of colonial fleets further ahead. That's a very long time to cement control over a ship, and control of information is a very good method for doing that. And speaking of long generations and rising numbers, finally there is the Gardener model. In earlier discussions of generation ships, we explored the concept of Gardener ships, vessels that not only carried colonists to a destination, but grow as they grow, seeding new worlds along the way. A fleet embodies this idea naturally. Some ships stop, some move on. Some split out to form new fleets, while others rendezvous again later. It is not colonization by lightning strike, but rather by steady rainfall, everywhere, gradually, cumulatively. Fleets head out from Earth to every nearby system, and when they arrive they drop off and resupply and move on, using those materials and time to replenish their numbers, of people and ships and gear, dividing into a slow-rolling wave all the way to the galactic rim. The lone Ark is an all-or-nothing gamble. The fleet is an ecosystem, and like ecosystems, swarms adapt, diversify, and endure. That is why, when we think of interstellar colonization, we must stop picturing a single heroic ship and start picturing clouds of them spreading across the galaxy. Each one is a fragment of humanity, carrying our culture, our genes, and our dreams, and together they are a swarm, resilient, redundant, and relentless. Forms of Arks. When we talk about Ark Swarms, it's not just about sending a lot of ships, it's about different kinds of ships and strategies that can mesh together into a living, evolving dispersal system. Humanity has never relied on a single tool or tactic to expand, and the same will be true when we take to the stars. Let's discuss some primary conceptual methods, and a fleet might incorporate aspects of more than one too. Classic Arks. The first visions of interstellar travel tend to revolve around familiar archetypes. Generation ships, where crews live and die en route, sleeper ships with passengers in cryostasis, embryo or seed ships that grow their colonists on arrival, AI crashes or data ships carrying human minds as software, and Methuselah ships, crewed by people with radically extended lifespans. Each has been imagined in fiction and engineering studies. Indeed, we have dedicated episodes for each one, sometimes multiple episodes, and each offers a different way to bridge the immense gulf of time between stars. But none are foolproof, which is why diversity in design is itself a survival tactic. Fundamentally, each shares the same mission, delivering people to a new system willing and able to conquer it, potentially literally too. Some strategies might revolve around seizing systems from a first wave of colonists or from terraforming machinery gone rogue. It doesn't take very long to repurpose a colony ship, which by definition must be able to build everything a colony needs, to switch gears from producing settlers to soldiers. Indeed, there's a lot of overlap in skills and mindset, and historically, you've often used the one to do the other. Hybrid models. From those roots come hybrids, like the Gardener ship or Gardener fleet, which doesn't just arrive at a single destination but grows en route. As mentioned, these ships might add colonists over centuries, divide to form new vessels, or plant settlements in multiple systems. Instead of one colony at the end of a voyage, the journey itself becomes a chain of settlements, a trail of seeds left in orbit or on worlds along the way. In many ways, this is a natural progression of fleet travel, redundancy and colonization spreading together. Self-building arks. Another form of swarm is built on automation. A single clanking replicator factory could, in theory, churn out more arks from local resources, multiplying the fleet exponentially. These are not tiny nanobots, or even the classic von Neumann probe or Astro Chicken, but massive shipyards in motion, assembling habitats, drives, and shielding as they go. A mission that begins with a dozen arks could become 100 within a few centuries, 1,000 within millennia, spreading outward like dandelion fluff on the cosmic breeze. Whether overseen by humans, AIs, or both, these self-building fleets add a growth curve to dispersal, turning colonization into an accelerating process. And to settle the whole galaxy in under 1 million years, as we probably can, means going from having to settle a new world every year or two to eventually needing to settle thousands a day. And you can do this with ships that can build more of themselves and grow more colonists too, naturally or by artificial means. Needless to say, their massive production capacity is also helpful for settling each system they enter. Complementary Fleets. Finally, there is the idea of specialization. Not every single ship in a swarm needs to be identical. Some might serve as transports carrying colonists, others as infrastructural vessels, packed with factories and reactors. Still others might be knowledge ships, whose primary cargo is archives, teachers, and cultural memory. Note that not all the ships in the fleet have to have the same size or population. A smaller archive vessel serving as a library, or even a monastery-like place of study and solitude, might drift behind some huge megacity in space, while ships that were basically giant farms dwarfed more heavily populated suburban spaceships. Standardization is for insects, and while we might use them as an analogy for swarms of ships, we are not required to keep their weaknesses simply because we make use of the strategy of overwhelming numbers. Many different vessels with many purposes, but likely most with more than one, and also able to retool to serve others for the strength of redundancy too. Together, such fleets function less like single expeditions and more like migrating civilizations, a mobile ecosystem where each ship contributes a vital role. In combination, they reduce the risks of knowledge loss, technological stagnation, or cultural collapse. In the end, how you swarm isn't a single recipe, it's a spectrum of strategies. Some are ancient ideas retooled for interstellar scale, others rely on technologies we can only speculate about, but all share one principle: never stick everything on one ship, one world, or one plan. Dispersal means diversity, in ship types, in tactics, in people, and that diversity is humanity's true shield against extinction. Engineering the Swarm. When we talk about dispersing humanity across the stars, the numbers quickly get enormous. That's the point. If the goal is to reach every star within 100 light years in under 1,000 years, then we need to treat interstellar colonization not as a trickle of ships, but as a flood. The numbers game. Within 100 light years, there are roughly 15,000 star systems, give or take, depending on how you count binaries and dim red dwarfs. I often call this the inner sphere, a term I borrow from the Battletech sci-fi franchise, and tend to assume each of these places is colonized directly from this solar system. If our goal is to send a fleet of about 100 ships to each, carrying on an order of 10 million people per fleet, then we're talking about spreading something like 1.5 trillion human beings into space in the span of a millennium. That might sound extravagant, but consider how quickly populations can grow. At even 2% annual growth, something Earth has managed in the past, humanity could double every 35 years. In 1,000 years, that's almost 30 doublings. Even starting with today's 8 billion, that would yield far more people than we could ever settle on local stars. I doubt we'll have problems achieving the needed growth, especially if life extension works out. We can always start vat-growing kids or duplicating volunteers if it comes down to it. If humanity ever spreads across the galaxy, our greatest ally won't be starships or wormholes, it'll be automation. Making a new world work takes a lot of work, and robots would help a lot. My November Nebula exclusive episode, Autonomous Space Industry, when AI and robots run the economy, dives into how self-replicating machines and AI-run industry might make interstellar civilizations self-sustaining, building habitats and infrastructure far faster than any human workforce ever could. And if you'd like to see another kind of grand, chaotic creativity in action, don't miss Scav, Nebula's latest original from Wendover Films. Every year, a 20-page scavenger hunt list sends the University of Chicago into sleepless, hilarious overdrive. And Scav follows 3 teams through 4 days of pure invention and joyful competition. That's just some of the amazing content available on Nebula. Get a lifetime membership, normally $500, for just $300 by using my link, go.nebula.tv/IsaacArthur, and unlock everything forever, or get an annual plan for 40% off, $36 a year. That's 12 months for the price of 7. Scan the QR code or click the link below to start watching exclusive content like Autonomous Space Industry and Scav. Launch Cadence. If we assume only modest growth, and assume sometime in the 23rd or 24th century, we start building ships en masse, aiming to send the last ship out by the year 3000, then we are needing to build an average of 20 fleets or 2,000 Ark ships a year, containing about 200 million people. If we assume for the moment that our solar system was aiming for 0.5% of local slow growth a year, but it was reproducing at more like 1%, more or less the modern level, it implies our solar system has 40 billion people. If you wanted, you could figure out how many ships you wanted to build a year, or what your preferred stable population was, and just make it a policy to ship out the extra population. For much of human history, this was the norm too. I don't know why people often think that population crises are something new to us, so we are psychologically wired to be able to let them work, even if it sounds a bit alien nowadays, just to leave home forever. Logistics. This is where fleets shine. A lone ship must carry everything it needs, forever. Fleets, by contrast, can leapfrog each other, rendezvous to trade parts or people, and even merge or divide as needed. They likely drop portions of their number not just on star systems, but on countless rogue worlds drifting between them, each serving as a relay or outpost. One fleet might find a system rich in asteroids and pause to build new ships, while another, arriving at a barren system, resupplies, plants a small outpost, and moves on. With hundreds of thousands of ships in play, the loss of a few hardly matters. Redundancy makes failure survivable, albeit no more desirable. Nor would we expect very high losses, at least on a scale of centuries or millennia. If we imagine ships still moving outward toward the galactic rim 250,000 years from now, like the fictional Unity from our Life in a Space Colony series, then yes, attrition might reach 99%, but even that would mean most ships succeed in operating for tens of thousands of years on average, longer than any empire or organization in human history. Astronomical timelines demand astronomical numbers, and the swarm absorbs losses by sheer scale. In this light, it's best to think of that swarm not as a collection of ships, but as a single living organism, its vessels the cells, passing information, resources, and people across the endless void. Colonization Styles. Now, for all that we're talking about 100 ship fleets with 10 million people each, that's just an example to make the math easier so we can contemplate sheer scale. Not every system needs or can support the same type of settlement. Some fleets will drop entire populations onto habitable or terraformable worlds, while others leave behind nursery habitats, orbital stations, asteroid bases, or modest seed colonies that can grow slowly on their own while the fleet continues onward. Entire mega-fleets dwarfing those huge colony armadas might arrive decades behind them carrying billions of people, while others might exist for millennia as mostly automated mining or star-lifting systems. Over time, some systems may become great hubs, producing new waves of fleets, while others remain quiet backwaters with only a handful of stations or domes. The important thing is that they exist, that they add another node in the network. So what does this look like in practice? In the first centuries, humanity might dispatch a few dozen fleets, millions of settlers heading outward on voyages of centuries. By year 500, with multiple colonies now building ships of their own, that number could swell into thousands. By the year 1000, the swarm may have reached every star within 100 light years and be poised to spill further. Hundreds of thousands of ships, billions of lives, a diaspora that even nature itself would struggle to extinguish. Odds are good that even beyond that inner sphere of 100 light years, most of those systems for at least another 100 or so light years will also be settled mostly from back here. But at some point you reach a state where new systems are being settled from close to the edge of the outward expansion. Probably still dozens of light years behind it though. Except for Gardener fleets, I cannot imagine many colonies being interested in sending colony ships of their own out till they've grown for centuries, which means there's those many light years back sending the new ships. These are really long journeys, and while interstellar vessels do not need to refuel for longer distances, I would expect many such ships would stop at systems along the way to trade and visit, or even conquer. We are human after all, and that's not always a bad idea. Stopping along the way to pulverize some crazed colony of militant fanatics before they turn an entire interstellar sector into a charnel house is not necessarily a bad thing, and a galaxy of billions and billions of systems, even an enlightened and peaceful species, is likely to have a lot of events like that just from sheer scale, and we're not really enlightened or peaceful, are we? We are also not terribly steadfast, so colony fleets might stop at systems close to the edge of settled space to trade out colonists who no longer wish to go all the way to the edge, or colonists from that world who may have decided they wish to continue on. It is a daunting vision, but that's the engineering of survival. Ark Swarms are not about heroic one-offs. They are about scale, redundancy, and relentlessness. Send enough ships, and even 99% fail, the survivors ensure continuity. Send them in fleets, and humanity stops being a species chained to one fragile world and becomes a civilization seated across the stars. The human side of swarms. If engineering and logistics make swarms possible, people make them meaningful. A single ship is a world in a bottle, cut off from its cousins, forced to reinvent culture and isolation. Fleets are different. Ships traveling together share stories, rituals, and even people. They can keep a cultural continuum across centuries, softening the tendency for colonies to drift into total estrangement. That does not mean the journey is painless. Every time a fleet reaches a system, even assuming you don't have spats or full-on civil wars during the trips, which would hardly be surprising, families and friends face choices. Some disembark, others stay aboard, and others move on. Tears will be shed at every branching as communities split. Governance adapts too. A ship is like a town, a fleet is like a nation. A single ark might fall under the grip of a tyrant, but a fleet disperses power and allows diversity. It would be hard to achieve simultaneous successful surprise boarding operations on each of a dozen or more ships, and those that don't can pretty much ensure nobody gets on board afterward, or even just light their engines up to add more distance or pick a new route. Councils, alliances, and even rivalries emerge between ships. The result is not uniformity but resilience, a political ecosystem as redundant as the engineering. And psychologically, fleets matter. To live on one isolated ark is to feel like an exile, cut off from Earth and any hope of external help. To live as part of a swarm is to be constantly reminded that other ships do exist, even beyond your own fleet. Rescue is possible. To feel like a migrant in motion, a participant in humanity's greatest pilgrimage. Instead of loneliness, there is momentum. Instead of exile, there is purpose. Purpose during the journey, too. These are communities the same as our own. They may have some equivalent to manifest destiny for their eventual arrival in a century or more of travel, but they still work, trade, play, and argue like any modern civilization does. They just have the extra binding glue of their destination purpose. Beyond survival, the Garden of Stars. Ark Swarms are not just about hedging extinction, they are about flourishing. Dispersal is not retreat but growth, the scattering of seeds that ensures a forest will arise. Each ship, each fleet, each swarm is a gardener's hand, planting civilizations across the galaxy, and perhaps beyond. And again, regardless of the insect's analogy, these are not identical ships or fleets of peoples. Diversity is not a side effect, it is the point, and it widens with each new light year they travel to, diverging from each other and their homeworld, even before arrival at some strange new world. Once there, one colony may be pastoral, living in green valleys under alien suns. Another may be cybernetic, its people uploading themselves into fleets of digital minds. A third may be deeply traditional, clinging to old languages and faiths. Some may live on planets, others in asteroids or moons, or floating settlements in the upper layers of gas giants. Just as stars vary, so too will our descendants. Each branch carries its own experiment on what humanity can be. Ironically, this method to prevent extinction actually causes it to some degree. Far enough back, there is some long extinct critter that all mammals are descended from, and which none of us are particularly like anymore, making it in an almost Schrodinger's cat-like state of existence, simultaneously abundant and extinct. And I imagine that as humanity's fate among the stars too, given enough time. That is the promise of dispersing humanity to the stars, a future where extinction is impossible, and where the human story becomes as vast, varied, and unending as the galaxy itself.